If you have a true scary story you want to see narrated on the channel, go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to send it my way. And of course, thank you. Also, my voice is still pretty messed up, so enjoy. Those close to me have heard this story so many times. It took me a while to finally get to the point that I could talk about it openly, but it wasn't always like that. It took many years as well as support and therapy, but I'm doing a lot better nowadays. Back when I was 22 and still a young guy, I had met a girl through a mutual friend. I'm going to refer to her as Anna. I went to a party that she was also at. We would talk here or there, not really knowing each other. Turned out she was the sister that tagged along who was a friend of the host. So basically my friend's friend's sister, if that makes sense. I didn't really know the friend very well, but we had met at previous parties. Anyways, we got to talking that night, and I think it was pretty obvious to a lot of people around us that there was definitely some chemistry between us. Too bad I didn't notice that it wasn't all good. We started dating shortly after and quickly became inseparable. I didn't really date much in high school, so with little to no experience, I fell pretty hard for her. It also didn't help that she seemed to be just as infatuated. We did everything together, went everywhere together, and we rarely had a disagreement. It was no surprise to anyone when I proposed to her on our 1-year anniversary. She dropped some not-so-subtle hints at it too, so I knew it was what she wanted. We had a pretty nice ceremony. My parents own their own accounting firm, so they paid for most of it. We had a great honeymoon afterwards, and life continued, with her moving into my apartment. She dropped some hints about getting a house, wanting kids in the future, and I was all aboard the idea, so we started looking soon after marriage, too. Thankfully, I already had decent credits, and with my parents' help, we were able to find a nice little 3-bedroom house that was perfect for us. Everything was right. I was happy, couldn't be happier even. And we were ready to even have our own family, and all of this at the age of 25. Nevertheless, things started to shift. But it started slowly until it just exploded. On the surface, we still seemed like the perfect couple. And both of us in successful careers. I was working for my parents' accounting firm. Anna was still working at a daycare and was one of the managers. She absolutely loved working there and being around kids, and we did well for ourselves. We shared hobbies and had a close circle of friends that we all knew and hung out with. But the more we were alone with each other, the cracks would form, and they grew bigger and bigger. It would start with just little arguments, things that would set her off easily. If I made something for dinner that I made last week, or expecting her to make dinner when she was off and I got home late from work, then the arguments would grow and she would become so angry that she would lock me out of the bedroom, making me sleep in the living room. Or she would leave for hours and not come home until late that night. Now, I understand having arguments and not wanting to be around the person, but one of the times she exploded and left for the night was literally because I was making stuffed peppers for dinner, when I had used peppers for fajitas 2 or 3 nights prior. I remember that argument to a T because it will not leave. Anyways, she left and wouldn't return for several hours. Then, when we would go out with friends, she was the cheerful and loving Anna, and it was always such a nice time. But then when we got home, she would get upset and accuse me of flirting too much with the server, or talking too much with one of our female friends, and eventually would even accuse me of having an affair. I was always faithful to Anna. As mentioned, she was my first for a lot of things, so she was all I knew and could want. Eventually, the accusations ate at me, and her jealousy was out of control, to the point that I stopped talking, and especially hanging out with a lot of our friends. I never spent time with any female friends, and the few guys I hung out with only happened if she was around me. So even those friends stopped coming around as much because she stopped being very fun to be around. I quickly became reclusive and didn't like to go anywhere, because I didn't want to listen to her and try to explain why I took 17 minutes at the store. So she started doing everything, except she would be out for hours. She got off work around 4 or 5, but wouldn't even be home until much later. I didn't know what to do. Yeah, I know what you all are thinking too. It's fine, but at the time, I was lost. I didn't know what any of this could mean. I didn't know this wasn't really normal. My parents always had a loving relationship, and they would go somewhere without questioning the other. They rarely had arguments, but when they did, it always worked out. I had nothing to compare my own to. But I was also too embarrassed to talk to anyone about it. My friends didn't want to hear it, I'm sure, and I was already feeling like a burden, so I certainly wasn't going to talk to my mother or siblings about it either. So I just suffered alone. But I knew there was one thing that you could never spin to be acceptable, and rarely could be worked out. One night, while I was watching TV in the living room, Anna got a notification on her phone making it light up. She grabbed it before I could even look at it, said she was going to bed, and then left the room. If you're ever in those situations, I think you kind of get the idea that something is going on, but either have no way to prove it, or maybe you're too afraid to confront it. In my case, I was a coward and didn't ask any questions. But later on, when I went to bed that night, she was already asleep. However, her phone was still going off. I looked down to see a message from one of my friends, Blake, and it just said nice with a winking face. It definitely caught my attention, so yes, I checked her phone. From the texts and pictures, it was obvious they were having an affair. I knew there was no coming back from this, so I took screenshots of the conversations, sent them to myself, and slept in the living room. Well, I tried to sleep. I still sat on this info for a few days before I finally confronted her about it, and that conversation was messy. It started as being my fault, and then she mocked me and made fun of me, until I said I wanted a divorce. Then she scoffed and said that I would regret it, that she was the best I would ever have. Then it cycled to her becoming kind, and asking me to reconsider, claiming that we could work it out. She almost had me. She almost made me think about it, but I quickly came to. She completely made me change who I was, and I hated it. So I was firm and told her nothing would change my mind, and that was that. The divorce was not clean and easy. She tried to get a lot from me because, yes, I was doing well financially because I worked for my parents. Unfortunately for her, since I had pictures of the affair, the only thing she had access to was the new car that I got for her and the house. But she didn't want the house because she couldn't afford it on her own. I got lucky, and that's not me bragging either. We ended up selling the house and just split the profit when it finally did sell. I had lost not only my wife, but someone I considered a good friend. But I was ready to learn from this and move on with my life. However, Anna apparently was not. It started out as the usual post-breakup behavior that I would expect from a teenager, that is. I would get random calls from blocked numbers, or text messages calling me names. Sometimes I would even be at a restaurant or out with a friend somewhere, and Anna would conveniently show up. The restaurant I was at, she hated. It was a Thai place, and she hated Thais, so she had no reason to be there other than to get to me. But I let it go. She was the reason we weren't together, so she could be bitter all she wanted. But then it escalated. One night, after having some drinks with an old friend, I went back to my little duplex and there was a cop there talking to my neighbor. And that's when I spotted my broken window. Someone had broken in. Apparently it was loud enough that my neighbor called the police, but she was also a little old lady, so she didn't go outside to check it out. So she also didn't see anybody. But when they asked me to walk around to see if anything was missing, I knew that it had to be Anna. The pictures that I had hanging up were all family, and any of the ones that I was in were broken and on the floor. My cabinet with all my model trains and stuff from my grandpa, he gave me the trains before he passed, and then after, I was given some of his other stuff, and it was all knocked over, crushing some of the trains. Nothing seemed to be missing of value, but just about everything that had sentimental value to me was damaged or destroyed in some way. I couldn't say for certain, but I had a very high suspicion that she had something to do with it. I made a report with the cop, but that was about all that could be done. But the break-in and semi-stalking was just a scratch compared to what she tried after that. Tormenting me wasn't seeming to work for her, so she targeted my friends. She tried convincing them that I was abusive, and that I had done these horrible things to her. The problem is, some people believed her. Her sister, of course, and our mutual friend from the party way back took her side immediately. They all started calling me and accusing me of things. And even worse, they started doing this on public forums. Facebook, Twitter, wherever they could post it, they did. This caused distant relatives to call not only me, but my parents to ask what was going on. I had even more friends starting fights with me and accusing me of being a bad person, and then even complete strangers. It was mentally and emotionally draining. I was losing friends by the day. People didn't want to talk to me because they didn't want to get involved. So, I found myself right back to where I was when we were together. Locked in my home and not going anywhere, thinking that I had no one left. People even started calling my work. The problem with that is my boss was technically my father, so when he heard all of this, he was pretty upset. Thankfully, he believed and trusted his own son, but the calls weren't good. I started working from home a lot, hoping to avoid her calling the office, and my father suggested that I should talk to my lawyer about it. He had a good point. If these accusations were true, why didn't she bring them up in the divorce? Because they weren't true, and she didn't have proof. After speaking to them, we took legal actions, but the damage was already done. I had a few friends that stood by me, but I also lost a lot because of Anna. From the moment I found out about her affair, she had turned my life upside down. With the suit we filed and the restraining order, I finally stopped hearing from or about Anna. It seemed like she finally got the point. It took years to finally get there, but somehow, I made it out. The whole time, there was never any physical altercations between us while we were together, or afterwards. But the mental and verbal abuse was astronomical. The worst part was that being a guy, I didn't share this with anyone, not wanting to look weak, and that was my own doing. I should have shared with someone what I was going through. No matter who you are not immune to that kind of mental turmoil. When I finally confided in my sister, of all people, she helped me understand that, and I went to therapy. It's taken some time, but I think I can finally say that I have healed and moved on. I wanted to share this with all of you as proof that anyone can get out of these dark spots, even when it seems impossible. I have a story about my ex that I would like to share with you, now that I've had the chance to sit down and write it all out. This all happened, I kid you not, within the span of 2 years. And that's it. I met my now ex, Oscar, when I was out with friends at a restaurant. He was our server, and after some flirting, he left me his number on the receipt. I jumped on the opportunity because I had never done that before. I texted him the next day, and not only did he remember me, but he was also surprised I actually messaged him. After a little back and forth, he asked me out that following weekend. The date was fantastic. We had dinner, went to see a movie, and then had drinks. Our relationship started pretty quick after that, and we became pretty attached at the hip. Even when I would go out with my girlfriends, he asked to go. None of us ever had an issue with it, as my last semi-serious relationship, he didn't even care to get to know my friends. Oscar, however, was always fantastic with my friends, and I loved it. But what I didn't expect was being proposed to on our 6-month anniversary. We had done so well together, and I was in love. We were happy. So I said yes. Life after that was the usual. We just had matching rings on our fingers. I did move into his place because he had a home that he had inherited after his grandparents passed, which was even better than apartment living. We still did everything together as normal, and we were both very happy, or so I thought. After about 4 months or so, Oscar started to change. It started as just him snapping at something that upset him. He would later apologize for his outburst and explain that he had a bad day or wasn't feeling well. Simple things like that. But then it seemed to escalate. Sometimes we would play harmless pranks on each other, like spraying each other with the sink sprayer, or scaring each other, and we would laugh, and even had a counter on each other for it. But one time I did it, he flipped out on me. He yelled at me about how stupid it was to do that, and it left me in tears. Except that time, he didn't apologize. He didn't give any excuse for it. I mentioned it when we went to bed, and he just said that he wasn't sorry because I was stupid. I then slept in the living room that night. Things escalated, and sometimes Oscar got so angry that he started punching holes in the wall, or would slam on the steering wheel if we were in the car. It was terrifying, and I was honestly scared that one of those might land on me. I had an aunt and friend who went through hell trying to get out of a horribly abusive relationship, so I knew that I had to take action. I started on a good day. Oscar was in a good mood. I made his favorite meal, and as we were finishing, I asked him about it. Specifically, I asked him if something was happening that he wasn't telling me about that was causing him to act that way. I even tried to word it in a way to be supportive, to see if there was anything I could do to help. Apparently, this was the wrong thing to do, because after calling me a few names, and me apologizing, telling him to forget about it, as a way to try and move on. But his response instead was to flip the entire dinner table, breaking everything on it. He then left, and I didn't see him for 2 days. I took this time to make some choices. I packed up a lot of my stuff, kept what I could in my hatchback, and stored the rest at my sister's. Not ready to tell my parents either. When Oscar came home, I was cleaning up the kitchen, something I had to do regularly, or I learned he got unreasonably angry about it. He quickly noticed some things missing and started mocking me for thinking about leaving. This told me he didn't care. He was not the man that I fell in love with and married. And I have no idea what happened and why in such a short amount of time. I went to the house later that month with divorce papers, and asked my sister to wait in the car. When I gave him the papers, all he did was give a small, annoyed smirk and shook his head. I tried talking to him about it, but all he did was sign the papers and throw them at me. Then he went to his room without saying another word. It could have gone worse, but it could have been a lot better. At least it was done, and I learned my lesson. It was only maybe a month or so after the divorce that I started feeling watched. Sometimes I would see his brother at the same store, but I would always catch him looking at me. And it wasn't a situation like you saw someone and you go, "Oh, hey." It was like, this guy is bad at asset protection. We would lock eyes and he would turn suddenly as if I didn't notice. Then I would get random calls from his younger sister. She always got along with me and was always a very sweet girl. But when she would call and ask me maybe some relevant questions about things we normally talked about, then she would mumble something to someone in the background and ask something about my day, like trying to hear about how my day was going. It sounded forced, like someone in the background was asking her to say it. It felt like she was being put up to it. But what I found interesting was that it was never Oscar I saw and heard from. It was his family. And I would also see other random people that seemed to be watching me, but never Oscar. To be honest, it was quite infuriating. It was like he was trying to keep tabs on me and watch me by making everyone else do it. The bigger problem with that was that meant I really couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't exactly put a restraining order on every person I saw staring at me, so all I could do was deal with it and just hope they would give it up one day. So, after a few months of this constant watching, stalking me by proxy and calling me, I got used to it, but I was still never comfortable with it. In fact, I didn't like going anywhere alone anymore. I would still go out with friends, but I never went to sit at a coffee shop or anything. I often did grocery pickup or delivery just to not be alone. I didn't want to take my chances. But most importantly, when I finally got my own apartment, I only told my parents, my siblings, and a few close friends where I lived. I wanted to avoid being followed home. However, as I was coming home from work one day, I saw someone leave my apartment complex that I didn't recognize. I may not have known all of my neighbors, but you could see the normal people coming and going. As soon as they noticed me pulling in, they pulled their hood up and did a quick turn to walk away from me. I immediately felt something was wrong, so I called the police to report it. They checked the area and escorted me to my apartment, where they also checked, but nothing was found. Again, all I could do was let it go. But a few days after that, I had a cop show up at my apartment, and after several questions, he asked me to go back to the station with him. Turns out, someone had gone to the station saying that they were being paid to have me killed, but that they couldn't do it. He explained that he was at the bar one night, and a man approached him, bought him a bunch of drinks, and gave him $1,000 to do it, and said that he would give him 1,000 more after it was done. The detective showed me the man, who I did not recognize, except the hoodie that he was wearing. It was the same guy I saw at my apartment, and the man he described that approached him was none other than Oscar. I gave the detective a picture of Oscar to show to the man, who confirmed that it was the same guy. So I was sitting there, a crying mess, with the thought that my ex-husband really just tried to have me killed. Why? He was the one that completely changed. I tried to reason with him to make it work, but he didn't care. I thought I didn't feel safe before, and I sure as hell did not feel safe after that. He was definitely found guilty and went to prison for conspiracy, and the man even came up to me and apologized. He said that he had never done anything like that before, but he was in a really bad spot, drunk with self-pity, and felt desperate. But after sobering up, he knew that he could never do it. He was a father himself, and I think that really saved me. I'll be forever grateful that the man turned himself in. because if he just declined or gave the money back, who knows where I would be today, if anywhere at all. I got married in my early 30s to a man named Kyle. I met Kyle at a fundraiser that my local church was hosting. I often volunteered at it because it was actually for shelter animals, and I loved playing with all the animals. He had stopped by when he saw the signs, and when he came over to see the dog that I had been brushing, we seemed to connect pretty quickly. He was very kind and funny, and yes, very easy on the eyes. He asked me out for coffee that night, and to my surprise, I actually agreed. I'm painfully shy when it comes to meeting new people, so I guess that's why I volunteer for a lot of animal events. You don't have to worry about awkward small talk. We hit it off pretty quickly and started dating shortly after. And when he proposed to me 2 years into our relationship, it was certainly unexpected, but I had no reason to say no. I loved him. We had been great together, and even talked about moving in together. When we married, I moved into his condo and I could not have been happier. However, things unfortunately started to fizzle out. I told him early in our relationship that I wanted to have kids, and he said that he did too. But as the years went by and I got closer to 40, he was 4 years younger than me, we still weren't there. And in fact, he said he no longer wanted kids. I was pretty crushed. I was a middle child of 5 total. All of my siblings had kids at this point, and I wanted my own too. He knew this. Why would you want to be with someone who had such important plans like that you didn't feel the same about? We had some serious conversations about it, but he was very firm on his choice too. At the time, I felt all I could do was accept his choice, but I could tell that it was eating at me. I started becoming depressed, and there was a lot of self-reflection. Kyle and I weren't the same outgoing and bubbly couple we once were, and I'm sure a big part of that was because of me. But it also didn't help that he never wanted to do anything either. He wanted to be at home a lot, and he always worked doing something on his computer or in his office. He worked in IT, so I understood, but we used to go out and do things together or with friends. But he never wanted to do that, so it only made things harder on me. Eventually, it all boiled over, and we had a pretty big fight. A lot of stuff came out. Feelings were hurt on both sides, and the only thing we seemed to agree on was a divorce. It turned out we both wanted completely different things in our lives. The next few months were a bit of a blur. We started the process. I moved out since it was his condo and stayed with the friend until I got my own apartment. We didn't really have all that much to split, really. We both had our belongings and just split other things as we saw fit. It was amicable after all, so we still talked throughout the process. I got my own place about a month after moving out. I didn't want to be a burden on my friend, even though she had no issues with me being there, and I still paid her rent anyways. It was after I had my own place that things started getting weird. At first, it all seemed like normal stuff. I started getting an influx of spam emails. Some were about counseling, divorce lawyers, and even some therapists. It was odd, but my first thought was maybe I was added on some list due to searches I had done about my divorce. Or, hell, in the world we live in now, maybe the lawyers sold my information. I just marked them as spam and moved on. But then, I started seeing similar ads on my personal pages like Facebook or Instagram, as well as some other types of ads. There were a lot of sexualized ads. and I was getting several requests from a lot of similar pages daily. They were inviting me to their private paid-for pages, as well as other things. I was confused. Sure, it was entirely possible that it was all just spam, but it was really strange how consistent the requests were. I certainly didn't have anything that screamed that I was interested in any of it, so I didn't understand. All I could do was delete, block, and mark not interested, which became nearly a daily chore just to keep up with them all. I got fed up with it at one point and started poking around in my settings to see what could possibly be causing it. To my surprise, I was following a lot of similar pages. I never followed anything like that. Why would I? I had no reason to. I thought maybe it was just some bizarre thing. Maybe they were once pages that I followed that were changed, bought out, or hacked, even. I just spent a few hours unfollowing and blocking people and pages, and moved on. The requests and messages soon stopped, which was good, but then there were more alarming occurrences. There would be random posts from my account where it had just shared my location. I would be at the store, at work, maybe even out with friends, and it would show Cassidy updated her location. Sometimes I would make a post when out with friends, sure, but I always said something about it. To just share my location was a bit odd. I just assumed maybe it was a setting I had turned on, so there I was, once again, going through my settings. But I couldn't find anything. I will say that I may use social media, but I am far from a pro at it, nor do I know about all the bells and whistles that come with it. So I just disabled location through the apps and moved on. But again, the posts kept happening. I decided to try and look further into it when there was a post made when I went to the doctors. And it wasn't just my primary doctor either. So there was some embarrassment there among the comments left on it, so I had to do something. When I started digging into things, I noticed that there were several active login sessions from different locations. They were all within my area, as in the same city, but they were on devices that I didn't recognize. This was pretty alarming, so I immediately logged them all out and changed my passwords, just in case. Surprisingly, the location posts stopped happening too, so I thought maybe my account had just been hacked, but all was well again. Or so I thought. Then, while I was at a friend's house for a small get-together, my friend was notified of a post that I made, and it once again tagged the location. But this time there was text that said, "Where am I?" I didn't make the post. How was this happening again? Together we both looked through my logins, and again there was a new login from a device I didn't know. This time, the location was different, and pretty specific. It was the city and state that my ex-husband worked in. It was just the next state over. We lived close to the state line, but I never went to that state. I had no reason to. I didn't know anyone there, and, in fact, I only ever went there a few times when I visited him on his lunch breaks. Of course, I couldn't be sure that it was him either, and, well, why would he do that? It's not like we were on bad terms when we split up. And it's entirely possible that someone else got into my stuff that was there, but it was a little suspicious to me. I was still confused as to how it happened. I changed my password. How were they able to make the post? At that point, frustrated and upset, I once again changed my password and set up multi-factor authentication to hopefully prevent this from happening. But then, one morning, I woke up to an excessive amount of messages on Twitter, texts, and missed calls. Once I finally started taking a look, I was horrified to see not only all of my private messages on Facebook were posted as screenshots there, but so were my bank statements. My bank was already calling me about alerts they were getting. People were upset with me because I had some pretty private conversations with friends, and now it looked like I had just aired all of their secrets. Before this moment, the only thing that happened on my Twitter were the earlier friend requests, so I didn't even think to check that. So I went through the process of deleting it all and changing all of my security settings. I was devastated. I had several friends that were heartbroken, and I had to change all of my banking info. I was stressed, and I just remembered not thinking straight and decided that I would take a shot and call Kyle to see if he might know anything and maybe even help me out. And that turned out to be both a good and a bad idea. I called him and he actually invited me over for dinner, and I agreed. The night was actually fine, and he seemed like the guy that he was when I first married him, almost making me forget why I was there in the first place. So I explained what was happening and he agreed to help me, at first. But then he had his own ulterior motives. He made some very suggestive comments, and when I refused, he became very angry. He started throwing things and punching the wall. It terrified me because I had never seen him like that before. I ended up just leaving that night and went home feeling used and defeated. He had to be the one behind all of it, and it was just this way of getting me over there. It even confirmed my suspicion when, later that night, there was a new post with my location at his place that made a comment about running back to my ex. To not make this any longer than it needs to be, the torment from him continued no matter what I did. I even went to the police, and they said that they couldn't even do anything about the cyberstalking unless I could prove that it was him. I couldn't figure out any solutions that would work long term, so I just took the nuclear option. While at a friend's place, I logged in from her computer, changed my email to a completely new one that I had just created from her computer, set up multi-factor authentication, and removed my phone numbers from the accounts, and then I deleted the profiles. Some of the things I did probably weren't necessary, but I wanted to check all layers to make sure he couldn't reopen anything. The last thing I did was get a new phone number and a new phone. No, I was not going to take any chances. And of course, only then did everything stop. To this day, very few people have my phone number, and I only just recently got a new Facebook account, so I could connect to some people whose number I don't have. I just don't ever want to be in that situation again. It was honestly terrifying knowing that he probably knew my every move, and I have no idea how he did it. So that, my friends, was a collection of some scary, disturbing divorce stories. However you want to look at that, probably disturbing more than anything. Were they scary? Yes, to some extent, with some idea of what the situations were. They were scary, but I think disturbing is better. They were very disturbing stories, because in these stories, the ex marriage partner, it did a lot to attack the divorcees. What am I saying? How do I say those words? Anyways, you get my point. These are like crazy X stories on steroids. They're like extra crazy X stories because they were married and then they're divorced and the person turns into an absolute nightmare. So there's that. Disturbing divorce stories. Disturbing divorce stories. Dissolving stories. Oh no. Stories of dissolving marriages. Ooh. See. Anyways, hopefully you all enjoyed the stories. Hopefully my post-COVID voice isn't bothering you guys too much. I know a lot of you will probably say your voice sounds fine, and I appreciate that, but I know what it sounds like. I know it's not normal, and I'm stressing it by doing this, but I want to do it. Do not tell me not to do it, because I want to do it. Anyways, it's been one hell of a week. We tried really hard to make patients not sick. We really did. I started having symptoms on Thursday-ish. We spent most of Thursday together. It wasn't COVID symptoms. It was like sinus pressure, sinus infections and symptoms at first. It was just my left nostril, like the inside of my sinuses hurt really bad. I'm like, wow, this is the worst sinus infection I've had in a long time. And then the heart rate issues started. And whenever the heart rate issues start, for those who weren't around the first time I had COVID, I think I mentioned it then. All 3 times I've had COVID now, which that number is climbing too much. We need to stop that. My main tell symptom is my heart rate skyrocketing. And whenever I say skyrocketing, I don't mean like, oh, it's 180 constant. I mean like whenever I'm laying down, it's like, oh, it's 100. And that's totally not normal for me. My resting heart rate's typically between 60 and 70. 80 if it's a bad day. Or if I just mowed the lawn yesterday. Anyways. So like I lay down or sit down, it's like it drops like 110. And then whenever I stand up, it shoots to 150. The first 2 times, the first time especially, was hell. The second time it was like, okay, this is definitely COVID. It's high, I stand up, it shoots up, my head starts pounding. That's the tell. This time around, it was like 100, and then it would drop to like 90, and then whenever I stood up, it was like 120. So it was very not like not like shooting up there, but it was higher than normal for me, and that was enough to make me know that I was probably sick. So I took a test. It was positive. I'm like, well, I stayed away from patients that entire, like, the rest of that day, and the day after. Like, I slept in the basement, in a recliner chair, in the basement. It didn't work. She got sick 2 days after I did. So, yeah. We're now on day 8 for me. 7-ish? 8, because patient's on 6. It sucks. We're at the tail end. It is what it is. You know what this means if you've been around. This long, drawn-out process of not feeling like crap anymore. And me downing water nonstop, and drinking teas, and trying to get my voice to sound normal. I swear, I feel like I just got back to normalcy and this happened again. So this sucks. But it is what it is. Anyways, hope you all enjoyed the stories. That was what I said there. We're at 4 minutes and I'm just now saying that. If you did, hit the like button. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard and want more, hit the subscribe button. Please leave me a comment down below the video with your thoughts, how you're feeling, how you're doing, how you've been this whole week. Better than me, probably. You can also join Patreon or memberships to get early access to content like this to support the channel further. Same with super thanks. Never ever expected, always appreciated. You can also listen to the podcast on Spotify and Pandora and Audible and Apple if you want. Or don't. Your choice. All that said, friends, hope you're having a beautiful day. Hope I see you again here very soon. But until then, remember that you are loved, you are valid, you are important. The best you that you can be, do not forget it. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And until next time, my friends, much love and sleep well.